Picture this. You walk into a pastry shop with your child, your pride already bruised your stomach empty, and you ask the simplest question in the world, do you have anything you're throwing away? Now imagine the manager decides to turn that question into a public execution. Stay with me, because what he thought was a quick humiliation becomes the moment his entire life starts collapsing, and he won't even understand why until it's too late. Do you have an expired pastry for my son? Diana's voice trembled as it cut through the quiet hum of the snack bar. She was 35 black, dressed in a worn dress that had seen too many hard days, holding the hand of her 6-year-old child, who hid behind her legs like she already knew the world wasn't always kind. The little girl's eyes were locked on the floor, not because it was interesting, but because looking up felt risky. Behind the counter, Roberto, the manager of Golden Pastry, lifted his head from his phone with the irritated expression of a man who thinks customer service is something beneath him. The moment he saw who was speaking, irritation turned into something uglier. Contempt with a smile, cruelty dressed as confidence. "Excuse me," he said, dragging out the word like it tasted bad. Diana swallowed and nodded toward her child. "It's her birthday today," she whispered, voice soft. "Careful. I just wanted to know if you have anything you were going to throw away anyway. It doesn't have to be fresh. Anything will do." A fork stopped midair at a corner table. Gabriel Williams, 48, dressed in faded jeans and a plain cotton shirt, looked up sharply. If you passed him on the street, you'd never guess he owned one of the biggest restaurant groups on the East Coast. He didn't carry himself like a billionaire. He carried himself like a man who watches and listens. He'd walked into Golden Pastry that day in disguise for a surprise inspection. Something he did when he was considering acquiring a business and wanted to see how. When nobody important was watching. And in that moment, he felt his attention lock onto Roberto like a camera finding focus. Roberto didn't just decline the request. He performed the decline. He raised his voice toward the kitchen like he wanted the whole room to be part of his little show. "Hey everybody, mashun," he shouted. "There's a beggar here wanting free food for her kid." Heads turned. The air changed. Some people looked away because discomfort is easier than confrontation. A few looked with pity. A few with judgment. Diana felt heat climb into her face, but she didn't step back. The child's grip tightened and a small sob slipped out. The kind that hurts more because it's quiet. "Please," Diana said, maintaining dignity like it was the last thing she owned. "I'm not asking for anything that costs money. Just something you would throw away." Roberto leaned over the counter, smiling wider, savoring it. "You know what the problem is with people like you?" he said. "You always have a story, always an excuse. It's my birthday. I haven't eaten in days. My dog is sick. I've heard them all." Gabriel put his sandwich down slowly. He didn't move fast, but his eyes sharpened. He'd built an empire by reading people. And what he noticed wasn't just Roberto's cruelty, it was Diana's posture. She wasn't begging the way Roberto wanted her to beg. Her shoulders were straight. Her chin didn't collapse. There was pain, yes, but there was also restraint, the kind that comes from someone used to holding themselves together under pressure. Roberto kept going. "This is a serious establishment. We don't feed bums. If you want something for your kid, get a job and pay like normal people." Then the child spoke, small voice, huge impact. "Mommy, let's go. I'm not hungry anyway." It was the kind of sentence that makes grown adults feel shame in their teeth. Diana closed her eyes for a second, took one deep breath, and when she opened them, something had changed. Not anger, not tears. Down, kissed her child on the forehead, whispered something in her ear, then stood back up and looked Roberto dead in the face. Her voice was calm enough to be frightening. "You're right," she said. "People like me always have a story." Then she turned and walked out, holding her child's hand, back straight like a queen leaving a throne she never wanted. Roberto laughed loudly, clapping sarcastically as if he'd won something. But Gabriel noticed the room, the way a few customers stared at Roberto with discomfort, the way one woman's jaw tightened, the way a man near the door looked like he might speak but didn't. Social dynamics are like systems. Ignore enough small signals and you create a big failure. Outside, as Diana stepped onto the sidewalk, her child glanced back and saw something strange. The man from the corner table, Gabriel, had stood up, not rushing, not chasing, following at a respectful distance like he wanted to make sure they were safe, or like he wanted to see what Diana would do next. 3 blocks later, they reached a neglected little square with a broken bench. The child sat swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. "Mommy," she asked, voice shaky, "why was that man so mean?" Diana knelt in front of her, eyes steady. "Because some people think they can treat others like trash and get away with it," she said. Then she pulled out an old phone, nothing fancy, but functional. "But they don't know something about me, sweetheart." "What?" Diana's mouth tightened into a smile that wasn't warm. "Your mommy used to be a lawyer, and lawyers don't forget to document." Gabriel watched from a short distance, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that familiar sensation he got when he saw real talent. Not loud, not flashy, just dangerous competence. Back at Golden Pastry, Roberto was still riding his own ego. He texted the employee group chat, bragging about telling a beggar the truth. Co-workers laughed and fed his arrogance. He screenshotted like a trophy.
Baby.
What he didn't see, because people like Roberto never look for consequences until they hit them, was Diana across the street, watching through the window. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shouting. She was studying. Broken security camera in the corner. Expired health certificate behind the counter. Pricing posters missing. The exact name stitched onto Roberto's uniform. She didn't need revenge fantasies. She needed facts. Then she made a call. "Lucas, it's Diana. Remember that favor you owed me? I need your investigative contacts. Nothing illegal. Just truth." Gabriel, positioned near a newsstand, saw it and smiled. This wasn't a victim looking for pity. This was a professional waking up. Diana walked back inside Golden Pastry calmly, like she belonged there. Roberto saw her and laughed louder, trying to make a second scene. Diana stepped to the counter and spoke politely, almost pleasantly. "I forgot to ask, do you have an up-to-date health certificate?" Roberto's laugh faltered. Diana continued, voice professional. "I intend to file a formal complaint about hygiene conditions I observed here. Also, I'd like to know if your employees receive training on consumer rights, because publicly humiliating customers can qualify as moral damages." She pulled out a small notebook. "And what's the full legal name of the owner of this establishment?" Roberto's face changed. He tried to puff up. "You can't come in here making threats." "I'm not making threats," Diana said, cutting him off gently. "I'm exercising my rights." She gestured to the wall. "You're also not complying with price display requirements." Then she lowered her voice just enough to make it sting. "And Roberto," she read his name off the uniform like she was reading an exhibit label. "Be careful with social media. The internet never forgets." Gabriel, pretending to browse pastries behind her, nearly smiled out loud. In 5 minutes, Diana had flipped the power dynamic without raising. Roberto scrambled for his phone to delete messages, but it was already too late. Outside, Gabriel approached carefully. Diana's protective instincts kicked in. She shifted slightly, putting herself between him and her child. Gabriel raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I was inside," he said, "and I'm impressed by how you handled that." Diana studied him. Simple clothes, but calm confidence. Eyes that looked like they measured everything. "You're Gabriel," she said slowly. "Gabriel Williams," he extended his hand. "And you're not who you seem to be." Diana shook his hand firmly. "Attorney Diana Santos," she said. "And you're right, I'm not." Gabriel smiled. "Neither am I." They walked to a small cafe a few blocks away. Once the child was distracted, Gabriel leaned in and finally laid it out. "I own the Williams Restaurant Group," he said quietly. 800+ establishments. I was considering acquiring Golden Pastry. After what I saw, those plans changed. Diana's eyes narrowed. "Why tell me?" Gabriel's voice lowered. "Because you're not just someone who got humiliated. You're someone with tools, precision, and someone underestimated you badly." Diana felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not rescue, but respect. Gabriel offered her a consulting role and a partnership path, legal oversight on customer rights and discrimination protocols. Diana didn't hesitate, but she set a condition. "When we're done," she said, "Roberto learns that humiliation has consequences, legally." And publicly, Gabriel nodded. That's exactly the point. Devastating, but clean. Her phone buzzed. Lucas. Multiple victims. Similar incidents footage, plus Roberto bragging online. It wasn't a single bad moment. It was a pattern, and patterns are easier to dismantle than a one-off. Roberto, meanwhile, kept feeding the monster. He humiliated an elderly woman counting coins. He posted again. He thought power meant he could do it louder, but every post was evidence. Every laugh was a timestamp. And when he finally opened his phone days later, the internet wasn't laughing with him anymore. Comments flooded in, shares multiplied, people tagged Golden Pastry demanding action. He tried to delete, but the screenshots were already everywhere. Then the door opened, and Lucas Rodriguez walked in with a camera crew. The kind of journalist who doesn't ask questions to understand. He asks questions to expose. Roberto's face drained. Lucas played Roberto's own clip back to him, and then rolled the footage of him humiliating the elderly woman. Roberto stammered out of context, but context was exactly what Lucas had in bulk. And when Diana walked in again this time in a sharp professional suit, composed, powerful, Roberto finally saw what he'd missed. This wasn't a broke woman with no options. This was a trained professional who had simply been cornered for a moment. Gabriel stepped in beside her, and Roberto's confusion became panic when he realized who Gabriel was and what that meant for ownership. "Roberto," Gabriel said evenly, "you're fired for cause." Diana slid a folder onto the counter. "And I'm filing claims for discrimination, public humiliation, and damages." Roberto tried to argue, but the paper trail was too thick, and the cameras were already rolling. The bully who loved an audience now had one he couldn't control. Months later, Diana wasn't begging for expired pastries. She was running a national program on Dignity First policies. Her child was in school, safe, thriving. Golden Pastry wasn't a place of humiliation anymore. It was rebranded, retrained, rebuilt. Roberto, meanwhile, couldn't outrun his own name online. The very tool he used to brag became the anchor that sank him. And that's the lesson he learned too late. When you underestimate someone because of how they look, you're not just being cruel, you're gambling your whole future against a person you haven't even begun to understand. Drop a comment about a time you saw prejudice dressed up as policy and share it, because the fastest way to end this kind of behavior is to make it visible where it hurts, in the light.